Aloha, everybody. Thanks for tuning in and being with me here for this live. This is a little bit of how to stop apologizing and start setting unapologetic boundaries in your life. And I wanted to basically share with you a little bit about, how do we stop over apologizing and why do we do that, right? I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. And also then how do we set healthy boundaries? In my experience, healthy boundaries require us to have a healthy mindset. And in one of the things that I've found is that it's really like a paradigm shift. We have to shift how we are approaching our interactions with other people. And the way that I teach my clients how to make that paradigm shift is through a process I call conscious reframing. Conscious reframing is pillar 2 of my Embodied Paradise Methodology. And there's 3 parts to it. Essentially, the first part is that we have to have basically this like awakened commitment to ourself. We have to be a yes to ourself, really, and to our awakening so that we can give ourselves permission to release society's expectations of us. And that helps us and allows us to stop apologizing for taking space up in this world, right? I believe that in many of my clients struggle with the belief that they cannot take up space, whether that is emotional space, physical space. But I think often as women, we do hold that belief that, we are not allowed to or supposed to take up space in this world. Sometimes it's even time. Sometimes we believe we're not, that we, for whatever reason, should not be taking up other people's time or energy or money or, and that lends itself, I think, to that over apologizing. But so part of conscious reframing is having that awakened commitment. That's really step 1 to yourself, being a yes to yourself. Step 2 is really showing up with fearless courage. It's showing up with courage to essentially move through and to reframe our fear-based limiting beliefs so that we can understand and release any codependent patterns that we might have. I'll be talking a little bit about that as well today. And then the last part is really like having this empowered conviction to speak your truth and to step into your power through, I call them radical self-love practices that really allow you to assertively speak up for yourself so that you can set healthier boundaries. So those are sort of my 3 steps that are part of my conscious reframing technique that I teach my clients. And you might be wondering, well, who are you to be sharing all of this, right? So my name is Sarah Slater Snyder, for those who don't know me. I'm a licensed therapist in Hawaii. I'm a registered yoga teacher, 200 hour, and I'm an elite embodiment coach. And essentially, I'll talk a little bit about what that means, but I moved to Hawaii about 20 years ago. I fell in love with this, slow down lifestyle and the culture here. I received my master's in social work from UH Manoa, and I worked as a high school counselor and psychology and yoga teacher for about 12 years before opening my own private therapy practice. And I've actually been running girls and women's circles for well over a decade. So during the pandemic, I saw this need for really space for women to come together and to connect and to uplift each other, because I think a lot of us were feeling very disconnected during the pandemic and somewhat alone. And so I founded the Women's Wellness Circle in 2021, and I founded my life-changing Abounding Woman program in 2022. And through my 15 plus years in this field of mental health and education and wellness, I've really come to sort of realize the power of integrating the things that I love, which are neuroscience, psychology, and yoga, to align body, mind, and spirit in a really innovative and powerful way. And so I'm here today with you because I have helped hundreds of women and girls, actually, and it might be more, it might be thousands, I don't know, over the years. It's been a lot, but I've really helped a lot of women to learn how to stop apologizing for taking up space in this world and start setting and holding unapologetic boundaries by stepping into their power and speaking their truth without guilt, without shame, without worrying about other people's perceptions of them. And so I want to start just by talking about where do we get stuck in this, right? I find that oftentimes we over apologize or we struggle with boundary setting because we have been raised either in families where there has been some codependence, or we somewhere along the way learned some beliefs that essentially we feel responsible for other people's feelings, emotions, reactions. And so I want to talk just for a moment about codependency, really like what that means. I define codependency as essentially like loving too much, caring too much, right? It's basically sort of this learned emotional and behavioral response where we feel this like excessive dependence on another person, including sort of this responsibility for their feelings or for their behaviors. And I'll give you some sort of examples or signs of codependency, right? Again, feeling this extreme responsibility for other people, feeling like a compulsive feeling or urge to care for those people, having difficulty maintaining boundaries, healthy boundaries, having trouble making decisions. So sometimes if we're codependent, we also find ourselves being highly indecisive, right? We sometimes feel like the need to control other people's reactions or behavior. And so often we're doing what I call anticipatory anxiety. We're like anticipating their reactions, right? That's a key sign of codependence. And as a result, we struggle to sort of communicate honestly how we're feeling and what we need. And so I'm going to just very quickly give you I call this my codependence quiz, just to determine whether or not you need healthier boundaries in your life. It's 10 questions. And just you can jot down your responses or make a mental note. It's just true or false, right? So you're going to answer true or false for yourself. Number one, I give more weight to others' feelings than to my own. True or false? So again, I'll read that. I give more weight to others' feelings than to my own feelings. Okay, number two, I frequently say yes when other people ask me for help. I frequently say yes when other people ask me for help. Is that a true or a false for you? And any of these that resonate, please write in the comments. I'd love to hear anything, that resonates when if you're raising your hand and you're like, oh my gosh, that's me. Please feel free to share. This is a safe, private space within our women's wellness circle. Number three is I often feel responsible for other people's emotions and or reactions. This is a common one. This is a really big one if we're codependent. Again, I'll read that again. It's I often feel responsible for other people's emotions and or reactions. Number four is I have a hard time expressing my needs to others, right? I have a hard time expressing my needs to others. True or false? Number five is I struggle with being alone. I struggle with being alone. True or false? Number six, I tend to be a fixer, a peacemaker, or a people pleaser in my relationships. All right, so just take a note. Is that true? Do you tend to play that role of being a fixer and a peacemaker or a people pleaser in your relationships? Number seven, I sometimes wonder why my relationships feel so one-sided. Right? Again, if any of these resonate or are true for you, drop it in there. And, just mention that in the comments. I'd love to hear which ones of these are resonating for you. So again, that was number seven. I sometimes wonder why my relationships feel so one-sided. So true or false? Does that feel true or false for you? Number eight, I am more of a giver than a receiver. This is also a very common one for anyone who's struggling with codependence. If you're just joining us, this is a little codependence quiz that I created. It's actually in my Path to Paradise workbook as well. That was number eight. Number nine, I struggle to make difficult decisions. Again, this is the whole indecisive thing. If you find yourself being really indecisive, often it's because we're worried about people pleasing, making sure other people are happy. And then number 10 is when a relationship becomes overwhelming or confusing, it's difficult for me to remove myself from it. True or false? When a relationship becomes overwhelming or confusing, it's difficult for me to remove myself from it. And so, based on how many you responded true or false to, I'll just tell you, if you're finding that you said true to at least like 3 of those statements out of the 10, you probably do need some healthier boundaries, right? And that's what we're going to talk about today. And a lot of this, so what I'm sharing is coming from my training, my background as a therapist, but it's also coming from my own experience as someone who was codependent for many years in relationship. And so like I could have said true to every single one of those, like just, I don't know, 10 years ago. That was totally me. Right. And so the reason also that I chose our mental health book club for our book for this month, I chose the book Codependent No More by Melody Beattie because I think she does a great job of really helping to like identify what are some of the codependent patterns and behaviors and the things that we sort of fall prey to if we've grown up in homes. She talks a lot about essentially growing up in homes where there's alcoholism or addiction present. But I just wanted to share a few of her quotes, and I will be doing a whole live in, I think it's next week maybe, on her book, Codependent No More. But just a little bit, I think she does a really nice job of just helping us to understand what codependence is. So she says a codependent person is someone who has let another person's behavior affect him or her, and who is obsessed with controlling that person's behavior. And that resonated for me so much, because if you think about it, like if you've ever found yourself in that place of people pleasing and codependence, you likely are spending so much energy like playing out scenarios in your mind. You're anticipating other people's reactions to you, or what can I say so that they will be less reactive, right? And that is actually like that's our way of trying to be in control, trying to control their reactions. But what we know, and she says this, the only person you can now or ever change is yourself. The only person that it's your business to control is yourself. That was like hugely that was a big breakthrough for me when I finally like accepted that. So she says the formula is simple for codependence. She says in any given situation, you want to detach and ask, what do I need? Not anyone else, but what do I need to do to take care of myself, right? And that, again, was a huge shift for me, because so much of my energy in these past codependent relationships that I was in I was so focused on the other person, what they needed, what they were feeling, what they were doing, right? That I essentially, in this book, she talks about how when we're codependent, it's basically like we're so over attached to that person, we become almost unattached to ourselves. It's like we lose ourselves. So her big message is really like, in order to sort of release those codependent patterns, we need to practice detachment, and we need to refocus our awareness, our energy, rather than focusing on the other person. We want to shift the focus to ourselves. So she says detachment involves present moment living in the here and the now. She says, when we allow life to happen instead of forcing and trying to control it, right? We relinquish regrets over the past and fears about the future, and we try to make the most of each day. And I don't know about you guys, but I have found this to be so true, that when we do feel like we need to be in control, we are living in this very like constricted, anxious, tense place where we're not really allowing life to unfold. We're not allowing sort of ourselves to surrender to the process of life, or to sort of our own experience. We're feeling like we have to control each part of it. And that is a very unhealthy way to live, because we're honestly just sort of always in this anxiety mode. So she says the rewards from detachment are great. She says you experience serenity, a deep sense of peace, the ability to give and receive love in self-enhancing, energizing ways, and the freedom to find real solutions to our problems. She says we find the freedom to live our own lives with excessive feelings, this is important, without excessive feelings of guilt about or responsibility towards others. And so this is the thing. I think that where we struggle so much as women is that we feel like we have to, we are obligated as women to be these human givers, as Emily Nagoski talks about in her book Burnout. She says we as women struggle with this like over-giving tendency because of our tend and befriend sort of, biological tendencies, really. But what she says is that, if we're living our life as a human giver, we're constantly putting out energy, we're giving to others, and we're not receiving. Exactly, Madison. Thank you. We're always the caretaker. And like, show of hands, right? Or put in the comments how many of you have felt like you're always the caretaker for other people. Everyone's coming to you to receive, support. Everybody looks to you to be their therapist. Everybody, is constantly coming to you. And so what happens then is that we feel responsible for other people, and we then feel guilt if we're not caretaking. Yeah, me too, Madison. I've been there. And so part of this comes, I think, from like honestly. Our society's sort of patriarchal conditioning that we are not supposed to take up space in the world. We're not supposed to take up emotional space. We're supposed to hold space for other people. We're supposed to take care of other people. And so we feel this like guilt or shame if we're not living according to the sort of society's expectations of us. But honestly, like the antidote to over apologizing is kind of saying like F it and like releasing society's expectations of us. So, and this kind of gets to sort of Brene Brown's whole thing of, the antidote to guilt and shame is really vulnerability, connection, and empathy. Knowing we're not alone in this, knowing that we do not owe anyone anything for existing in this world, right? Yes, Nadia, thank you for saying that. You said, yeah, always feeling like we have to listen to them and their needs and we don't speak up for our needs. That's exactly that codependent pattern. And so I just wanted to share, think about for a minute the ways that we're told not to take up space as women. We're told, everything in our society is telling us like, physically, don't take up space, be thin, lose weight, all the things, right? But the only thing that we really need to lose is the weight of other people's expectations. If you think of also as women, we're taught to sort of stay silent, not speak up for ourselves, not speak up for our needs, but we are worthy of finding and using our voice. You are allowed to advocate for yourself. You are allowed to negotiate a higher salary. You are allowed to ask for what you need and for what you want. And to be honest, that's one of the things that I find myself repeating a lot with my clients is giving them permission and for them to give themselves permission to ask for what they need and for what they want. Rather than make it about the other person, it's about you. This is your life. This is your daily experience. So again, also, I think another way that we're taught not to take up space is that we're taught to sort of tend and befriend first, care for others' needs before our own. Right. And no, like think about when you fly on an airplane. What do they tell you? They say, put on your mask first so that then you can take care of the person next to you and, care for them in whatever role or way you need to care for them. But you have to put your own mask on first. You have to take care of yourself first. Right. And so that's sort of this whole, how do we stop over apologizing? We have to start thinking about ourselves and being willing to put ourselves first. I'll give you another example. And this is such an easy, simple one, but it kind of blows my mind, right? If you think about, imagine yourself like walking down the street, right? Typically, as women, we tend to move over. We tend to move out of the way. I think of like, on a beach walk, even here in Hawaii, like walking on the beach and somebody's walking towards you. Generally, we as women move out of the way to make space for others because we don't feel like we can take up that space. Well, see what happens. Give yourself permission to see what happens if you don't move out of the way. Unapologetically, give yourself permission to take up space when you walk down the street or you walk down the beach, right? Like, I'm not saying to be rude to other people, but I am saying, no, like, you are allowed to be there just as much as the other person. So, I'll give you also just some examples, and I posted this the other day, but some ideas on stopping the over apologizing. Often I'm sorry is not even necessarily what we're trying to say. It's just like what comes out because it's habit, right? So instead of saying I'm sorry for something, so I'm sorry for being needy, right? We might say just thank you for being there for me. Or instead of, I'm sorry for talking so much, we might say, oh, it's so much fun exchanging ideas with you. Thank you so much for listening to me, right? Or if rather than I'm sorry for being late, right? Thank you for waiting for me. We can say that instead. It's incredible what happens when we basically shift out of the guilt and the shame and the apology and into gratitude. That changes everything. That changes our whole energy when we're in a place of gratitude, right? So that is a really simple way to shift out of the I'm sorry and the over apologizing. Just shift into gratitude. Instead of I'm sorry that I'm crying, thank you for creating a safe space for me. Thank you for holding space for me. Or I'm sorry for not replying right away to your email. Thank you for your patience. I appreciate you. So it's finding ways to still express your gratitude and express your appreciation, but without apologizing for what you needed to do for yourself. So I wanted to also then talk about, so that's a little bit on sort of the apology, but what I also want to talk about are, well, then how do we set healthy boundaries? Like, okay, if we can release sort of society's expectations so that we stop over apologizing, what do we need to do to start setting some healthier boundaries for ourselves, whether that's in our life or in our, in our relationships and our business. And I think that there's different types of boundaries. So I'm going to talk about those. I would say the healthiest boundaries are really like sort of a nice combination. What we don't want to have boundaries that are too rigid, where almost we're like walled off, where we keep other people at like a physical or emotional distance. And we don't want to have boundaries that are too like porous, or where we sort of, there's like holes in our boundaries. We get too emotionally or physically involved with other people, right? We want like a nice sort of middle ground where we can say no to other people. We're comfortable saying no, but we also allow ourselves to get close to other people. We allow ourselves to be, intimate and have close relationships. And so most people have sort of a different mix of these boundary types. But I want to talk about, there's so many different types of boundaries, right? There are physical boundaries, emotional boundaries, time boundaries, sexual boundaries, intellectual boundaries, relationship boundaries. So many different ways that we can hold space and take up space for ourselves. So I'll give you an example of like a physical boundary. I'm really tired right now and I need to rest. Or I'm really hungry right now and I need to go take care of myself and eat, right? That's a super simple physical boundary where we're protecting essentially our own personal space, our privacy, our basic needs. We're hungry, we're tired, whatever it is we're needing. An example of like a simple emotional boundary might be, I'm feeling uncomfortable. I'm feeling uncomfortable with the way that you're speaking to me right now, right? This is a big one I share a lot with clients, is just the simplest, like, I'm not comfortable with that. That's making me uncomfortable. I'd prefer to keep this private, right? It's essentially an emotional boundary, is respecting and honoring your own feelings by really protecting your emotional space and your energy by letting other people know if they're making you feel uncomfortable. And really by giving yourself permission to choose your level of vulnerability, right? You get to decide how open you want to be with other people. A time boundary is basically where we're protecting and like managing how we spend our time. So that would be, somebody asks you to do something, but you know that you need some downtime for yourself. I'm not available tonight, right? I need to actually take care of myself in some other ways. Let's see, gosh, there's so many different ones. Okay, I'll say, so a sexual boundary, right, would be obviously where we're protecting not just our body, but maybe even our desires, like our sexual desires or our limitations based on our comfort level, right? So being willing to say, like, I prefer to get to know each other before we get intimate. I'm not comfortable, going there right now. Another example of a relationship boundary, right, is being really clear in what behaviors you're not willing or you are willing to put up with. So a common, great, simple boundary is, this isn't working for me, or my needs are not being met in this relationship. Or let's see, so I'll give you, there's two other types of boundaries, intellectual and material. An intellectual boundary is like when we're protecting our thoughts, our ideas, our, basically our comfort level around certain topics. So like, for example, I prefer not to talk about politics. Thank you. Or a material one would be like setting some limits on our possessions, on our money, on our resources. So I prefer not that we don't actually take my car on this trip. I prefer that we split this check, right? So it's like being unapologetic, being willing to say what we need and what we want to other people. And so how do we do this, right? So I think sort of what I teach my clients is, we want to first identify and define the boundary that you want to set, right? So you got to know which of those types of boundaries are we setting here. Is it a physical boundary, an emotional one? Sometimes it's a combination of things, right? Then we need to be willing to unapologetically say no. We don't have to apologize for the no, just no. I said no. I'm not comfortable with that, right? We need to be able to then assertively communicate what we need from other people. I need you to stop. I've asked you to stop, right? And then keep it simple. Like, you don't have to explain your reasoning or your why, but you can. Sometimes it does help people to understand why it's important to you. You don't have to over explain it, but you can simply say, I need you to stop because you're making me uncomfortable. Right? And then I think the last step is, if you're finding this process difficult, reach out for support, right? Like, you don't have to do this alone. You can reach out for help and support along the way. So I'll give you some example of like what some other examples of what healthy boundaries look like, right? Saying no without guilt, asking for what you want or what you need, taking care of yourself, saying yes because you want to, not out of obligation or to please other people, feeling safe to express your difficult emotions. And this is a big one, feeling safe enough to disagree with other people in your life, right? Like we don't want to just be like a yes woman. We don't want to just be people pleasing. We want to give ourselves permission to say what we're actually thinking, even if that means that another person might disagree with us, right? Like a big thing when we're codependent, we often struggle because we feel responsible for that person's, other people's feelings. And as a result, we change our own behavior or what we tell them because we don't want to make them angry. We don't want to make them upset. Well, my suggestion is get a little bit more comfortable tolerating other people's discomfort. Allow them to be angry if they're angry. Allow them to be upset if they're upset. That's okay, right? It's okay for other people to feel whatever they're feeling. It's okay for you to feel whatever you're feeling. So again, allow yourself to express what you're feeling, even if it's a difficult emotion, even if it means there's going to be a disagreement, that's okay, right? And give yourself permission. So again, along the lines of like, what do these healthy boundaries look like? Give yourself permission to be treated as an equal, to feel supported in pursuing your own goals, to take responsibility for your happiness, right? Like a big thing that I see with my clients who struggle with codependence is again, they are feeling like their mood depends on their partner's mood, or their feelings depend on their partner's feelings, or what we do tonight for our date depends on what they want to do. What does our partner want to do? Not what do I want to do? And so, no, like take responsibility for your own happiness and your own mood and your own emotions. If we're relying on other people to kind of like determine how we're feeling, that's a really unhealthy place to be, because it's sort of like we're constantly being affected then by other people, right? Like our partner comes home and they've had a bad day, and then instantly we're in a bad mood too. Something changes when you become an observer of your external experiences and you allow other people to feel whatever it is that they're feeling, right? Like allow your partner to come home and be in a bad mood. That's okay, but that doesn't mean you have to be in a bad mood, right? That's sort of an emotional boundary, is to allow allow them to experience. So this is sort of a little mantra that I use sometimes with my clients. What's theirs is theirs. What's mine is mine, right? Like give them permission to feel what they're feeling, and give yourself permission to hold some boundaries up so you don't have to experience that yourself. Um, you want to, and part of that is you need to be in tune with your own feelings. You need to be in tune with your own sort of internal experience, and have some language to be able to express what you're feeling, what you're thinking, right? So knowing and expressing who you are, what you believe, what you like, what you don't like, that's a really important process in learning how to sort of set some healthy boundaries for yourself. If we don't know what we like, if we don't know what we're thinking or feeling, because we're so used to just relying on other people to tell us those things, right? That sort of almost facilitates codependency, right? So if we, again, remember what Melody Beattie says, if we want to shift out of codependent patterns, we have to practice detachment. We have to practice asking ourselves, what do I need in this moment, right? And so I'll tell you, like a lot of what I do with my clients is really simple embodiment practices. One hand on the heart, one hand on the belly, closing the eyes, checking in with yourself. What do you need in this moment to bring you joy? I can't even tell you how many times I've asked that question to my clients, and they're like, I don't know. I haven't thought about what I actually want, what I actually need, because we're so like tuned into other people that we haven't really tuned into ourselves, right? And so that is a big one. And I'm going to ask you actually to just take a moment with me, place one hand on your heart, one hand on your belly. I'm going to ask you some questions. Close your eyes. Let's just take a moment to take a few deep breaths together. Allow yourself to just ground into your body, right? Through the breath. Allow yourself to really arrive, be present. There's no judgment here. Those deep inhale and exhale breaths. Really feel that breath as it's moving through your body. Allow the exhale breath to just let go of any place that's holding some tension, holding some fear. We release it with the exhale breath. right? And I want to ask you some questions. When you're here, once you arrive sort of in a more grounded, connected place, with whom in your life do you need to set healthier boundaries? Right? Like take a moment. Maybe there's an image or a person that comes to mind. Who do you need to set some healthier boundaries with? And what type of boundaries do you need to set with them? Are they physical boundaries? Are they time boundaries? Emotional boundaries? And why do you want or need to set those boundaries? Right? That's a really important question, is why do you feel like you need those boundaries? And then what specific actions can you take to improve your boundaries? Like once we know that we want to establish a boundary, well, what do we need to do to make that boundary happen? Like what's your first step in improving those boundaries? And so that's a really great journaling prompt, actually, is sort of what first steps, what specific actions can you take to start to set some healthy boundaries in those relationships? And then the last question is really like, how might your life be different once you've established those healthier boundaries? Right? So maybe you're sort of just envisioning for a moment, like, what would your life feel like? How would it look? What would be different once you've established some healthier boundaries? And I want you just to hold that vision in your mind for a moment, hold that vision in your heart. And if you are sort of finding yourself, feeling a little bit stuck on this, or feeling like, this is what the boundary that I know I need to set, but I'm not sure how to get from, point A to point B, like you don't have to do this alone. That's why I'm here. That's why I created the Women's Wellness Circle. That's why I offer my sessions. That's why I have my Abounding Woman program, right? Like if you've enjoyed this training on boundaries, really, I want to invite you to learn a little bit more about my Embodied Paradise method, which really teaches high performing women who are feeling mentally exhausted, who are feeling drained because they're putting so much out there to other people. It teaches you how to embody your highest potential, how to embody actually like health, mental health, and balance so that you can live a more self-actualized, meaningful, and fulfilling life. Right? That's really what it is that I teach. And I'll just walk you through the simple 3 steps of my Embodied Paradise method. Really, step 1 is that I'm going to teach you how to create your own fully embodied paradise, right? Like, yes, I live in Hawaii. It's an amazing place to be, but paradise is not a destination that we save for necessarily. It is actually a vibe. It is an energetic sort of way of being in this world, right? And so what I teach really are very simple strategies, soothing somatic strategies that allow you to transform your exhausted reactivity into your own, so that you can sort of create your own internal sanctuary, right? And that builds this like expansive nervous system regulation through these experiential kind of somatic soothing strategies. And that's step 1, right? So I teach a whole variety of different like grounding techniques, and I teach restorative yoga and yoga nidra and all these different things that really allow you to create your own fully embodied paradise. Step 2 is what I focused on today, which is conscious reframing, right? Conscious reframing really stops that anticipatory anxiety in its tracks, and it rewires your thinking patterns by, again, awakening your commitment to your highest self, right? Which, with that fearless courage and that empowered conviction to speak your truth. And we have to show up for ourselves that way. I mean, if we want to change something in our life, we have to change our mindset first, right? And so this is where really you learn how to shift and reframe your limiting beliefs to step into the conscious, confident, unapologetic CEO of your life, personally and professionally, right? And then the last step in my Embodied Paradise method is that I teach you my elite embodiment practices that allow you to connect to your highest self, allow you to really connect to that highest and wisest part of you by giving yourself permission to elevate to that level. If we want to sort of step into a more elite version of ourself, we have to give ourselves permission to actually embrace radical self-love as a daily practice, and to create sort of more authentic presence, more fulfillment, more meaning in our daily experience through super simple embodiment practices, right? So much of what I teach, they're very simple strategies that you can, like what I teach my clients is I want to give you like a toolkit of skills, and you get to pick and choose which tools from that toolkit resonate and work best for you, right? So If you're feeling ready to learn a little bit more about my Embodied Paradise method and how that can help you to step into sort of your highest elite potential, again, as that calm, conscious, confident CEO of your life and your business, drop Paradise in the comments. I would love, love, love to connect with you. And what we'll do, if you want to learn a little bit more, we'll chat, right? We'll just connect, and I want to learn a little bit more about, like, what are you doing currently to sort of optimize your health? And then we'll identify what are some gaps in your process. And I'll share with you how, again, sort of my process, my Embodied Paradise method, can actually support you in elevating into an elite version of yourself. Because I think that's really what we all want. We want to live as our highest, wisest, most self-actualized version of ourself, but often we don't really know how to get there, right? And that's what I can sort of help you and guide you to give you some really specific feedback, some really specific strategies to sort of identify the gaps and fill those in so that you can really live as that highest elite version of yourself. So thank you guys so much for being here with me today. I would love to hear anything you can drop in the comments. One thing that resonated with you from this live, something that spoke to you, please share. If you have a question, something you're still wondering, ask it in the comments. I really would love to connect. And if you want to learn more and you want to, chat privately, just drop Paradise in the comments or reach out to me in the DMs, and I would love to support you in releasing some of those codependent patterns to be able to step into that higher self that is calling to you, that you are longing for. So I appreciate you guys so much for being here, and I hope you have a beautiful Aloha Friday. And I will be back here live, I believe, next week, sharing and talking about the book Codependent No More by Melody Beattie. If you haven't started reading it, I highly suggest it. And I'll be doing a little bit of our mental health book club live and debrief next Friday. Okay. All right. Thanks, guys. Happy Aloha Friday.